Iran says it has summoned all of the European Union ambassadors in the country to protest the bloc's listing of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as a terror group. President Trump says Iran is now seriously talking with the United States, even as he highlights the presence of powerful American naval forces in the region. Our chief national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has details tonight.
After a warning from CENTCOM, Iran now says it has no plans to carry out live-fire exercises in the Strait of Hormuz, despite announcing last week the IRGC Navy would be holding drills in the narrow strait. In the Red Sea, the guided missile destroyer USS Delbert D. Black conducted a joint military exercise with Israel Sunday.
Americans should know that if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war.
President Trump said he plans to give negotiations a chance.
Right now we're talking to them, we're talking to Iran, and if we can work something out, that'd be great. And if we can't, probably bad things would happen.
Talks are slated for Friday in Istanbul. They will be led by U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, who is en route to Israel to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The UN nuclear watchdog says Iran still has 972 pounds of highly enriched uranium, enough for 10 bombs. The head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council says Iran will not transfer its highly enriched uranium outside of the country and won't agree to limit the range of its missiles. Trump allies and Iran hawks are putting pressure on the White House in the wake of the Iranian regime's deadly protest crackdown.
President Trump, you said help is on the way. That has to be real. It has to be real soon. You're Reagan plus. This is the defining moment in your presidency. Stand by the people. The Ayatollah falls. The region changes. Bigger than the fall of the Berlin Wall.
The Trump administration has long criticized the Obama administration for negotiating a nuclear deal that ignored Iran's ballistic missile stockpile. Israel has also urged the U.S. to focus on Iran's ballistic missiles, John.
Well, we'll see if anything comes of that. Jen, thank you for the update.
All right, moving on overseas, the U.S. and Iran are reportedly preparing for talks in Turkey this week in hopes of easing tensions between the two nations. This as the Ayatollah warns the U.S. not to attack Iran, posting on X, quote, "The Americans should know if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war." But President Trump isn't backing down, saying this when asked by a reporter.
On Iran, the Supreme Leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Giving you response to that?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that. But we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Joining me now is former Deputy National Security Advisor and Heritage Foundation Vice President Victoria Coates. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us this morning. As the president shows U.S. military strength coupled with a willingness to talk, where do you foresee all of this going?
Well, good morning, Carly. I think it's going to take more than an X post to prevent President Trump from taking whatever action he decides is in the interests of the American people. And so we'll see what happens in Turkey this week. Obviously, everyone would prefer diplomacy. This has been on offer for the Iranians for over a year now. They didn't have to have the 12-day war in June, which they lost by every conceivable metric, disastrously for them. And so if they're now in a condition where their economic mismanagement, the disaster that's going on in that country, is so severe that they're actually willing to make significant concessions to the United States, particularly on the nuclear file, there's no harm in having a discussion about that.
No, there certainly wouldn't be. But the single most important condition in terms of negotiations for the United States would be for Iran to denuclearize and give up their nuclear weapons ambitions. But there are already images that show that Iran is already rebuilding those nuclear facilities that were bombed shortly after the 12-day war during Operation Midnight Hammer. So if that's the most important condition for the United States and it's a non-starter for Iran, I mean, does that only leave military action being taken?
Well, it's hard to see a different path. But again, I think we're in a different place than we were in June. I think the Iranians thought when President Trump came back in that he was somehow, so eager to get a deal that he would put up with all of their nonsense, their endless sort of tergiversations. They're trying to play for time, and all the while they were going for a nuclear weapon. That's what he showed them with Midnight Hammer, that was not going to be tolerated. He did very significant damage to that program. As you said, we think they are trying to rebuild. That's something the Israelis are watching very closely. We are as well. If that's the case, and we can get to a verifiable deal, that they give that up because they think that their survival is at risk now, then, as I said, that's fine. But at the same time, we now have a president, Carly, who has demonstrated not just through Midnight Hammer, but also through absolute resolve, the action against Maduro in Venezuela, that he is willing to use American strength when it is necessary, particularly in a targeted way that changes the conditions on the battlefield. So if the Iranians think they can just kind of string the Trump administration along through these talks in Turkey, I think they're probably going to come to some more grief.
Yeah, and moving from the Middle East to Europe now, I want to ask you about the war in Ukraine, because President Trump negotiated a temporary pause in fighting between Russia and Ukraine because Ukraine is experiencing this extreme cold snap and many people are left without power. But Vladimir Putin just violated that in a drone strike, killing 15 people. There were energy workers, off-duty miners. So how should the president respond to this, the violation of what he had negotiated?
Yeah, the situation in Ukraine remains just a really grinding, long, hard slog. And I think we saw some positive steps in terms of the trilateral talks that took place. Hopefully there'll be another round of those to come up. There was sort of a surprise meeting between Steve Witkoff and some Russian officials in Florida over the weekend. So hopefully everyone is still talking. It's always unfortunate that we're dealing with Vladimir Putin, who has no compunction about taking human life, civilians, as just happened in that terrible strike in eastern Ukraine. So hopefully this is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and we can continue to make some incremental progress.
Yeah, the latest rounds of talks between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine are taking place later this week in Abu Dhabi. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us.
On Iran, the Supreme Leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Giving you response to that?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
President Trump responding as Iran's supreme leader came out of his bunker and warned any U.S. strike on the region will spark an all-out regional war. It comes as the U.S. and Iran are reportedly preparing for talks in Turkey this week as the president hopes to strike a nuclear deal in the next few days. At least that's what he says. Hudson Institute senior fellow Rebecca Heinrich joins us now. Rebecca, do you think the president's really focused on a nuclear deal with Iran, or is there something else happening?
I don't think that a nuclear deal is in the offing. I don't think it's the president's #1 priority at this point. Remember, Brian, we significantly degraded the Iranian nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer. And the only person in Iran who even has any authority over the nuclear program is the Ayatollah Khomeini. And he is not only mocking President Trump, but he's threatening the United States of America directly, saying that the United States needs to be, quote, held accountable. So, no, I don't think a nuclear deal is in the offing. I think President Trump is still getting all U.S. forces settled in the region. Of course, there's a massive amount of naval-powered air power already in the region, Brian. And I think that we're going to get some missile defenses ready to go where U.S. troops are deployed and within range of some Iranian ballistic missiles. But I think that there's still going to be a strike soon. It depends on this point what President Trump has in mind for what his targets are.
So, Rebecca, I want people at home to see a map of all the proxies that Iran is financing, knowing their people are running out of water in the nation's capital, their food prices going through the roof, their diminished currency gets loses value by the day, but yet they're writing checks to all these horrible organizations who Israel says is violating the ceasefire. So there is a breaking point here where they're creating chaos in the Middle East. Their people are starving, rising up. They're slaughtering them in the streets. What is America's correct role here?
Yeah, so the Iran regime is the greatest source of instability throughout the entire Middle East. So you make a great point, Brian. I mean, Iran isn't just slaughtering its own people, which it is. President Trump made a very clear red line that if the Iran regime turns on its own people, that the United States would come to the aid of the people. We now know from credible reporting as many as 30,000 or more innocent young Iranians have been slaughtered by the Iran regime just in the last couple of weeks, Brian. And then, rather than trying to solve that problem and regain stability, the regime is funding and fueling terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East, disrupting President Trump's peace plan with the Israelis. And of course, Americans have also been killed by proxies funded and by the Iran regime. And so for President Trump, I think to finally push the regime over and let the Iranian people take control of their own country is a major strategic opportunity for peace and stability in the Middle East.
And Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Oman, and Turkey are scrambling, they say, to stop the U.S. from striking Iran. But yet all those countries have had huge problems outside Turkey with Iran. What are we to believe?
So all of those countries benefit from a severely weakened and degraded Iran, and of course, a removal of the Ayatollah from the Iran governance. And so all of those countries are really enemies of the Iran regime. They benefit from having a strong Israel, actually, in the Middle East to stabilize the area. So I think, Brian, sometimes those countries will publicly say they oppose it because they have domestic Muslim audiences that are tied to what happens in the region. Of course, they don't want to be seen as siding with the United States. But I think their interests align with ours. Having a significantly weakened Iran regime is in the interest of all of those Gulf states and partners, especially for economics and trade and, of course, energy markets as well, Brian.
It's in our national interest to make sure this regime goes. They've killed thousands of Americans, not just in the Iraq war and other terrorist activities. They threaten our president. They're targeting people in our country that they don't like Iranian journalists. This has got to stop. It can't stand. The people of Iran can't stand their leadership, and they've never been more vulnerable. Rebecca, I hope the president takes action. Thanks so much for joining us today.
In the meantime, you've got President Trump striking a positive tone on the chances of a deal with Iran. That country's supreme leader, though, keeping tensions on the boil. This tough talk from this weekend.
We are not the initiators and do not want to attack any country, but the Iranian nation will strike a strong blow against anyone who attacks and harasses them. Also, Americans should know that if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war.
So now, from the White House, the president shrugging those remarks off. He also pointed out the buildup of U.S. forces in the Middle East. He said this in Florida at Mar-a-Lago.
Supreme leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Giving you response to that?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course, he would say that. But we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
All right, a lot to cover on this. Dan Hoffman's the man to do it, former CIA station chief, Fox News contributor. Dan, good morning to you, and thank you for your time. Here are the naval assets now that the U.S. has deployed, and there's a lot of firepower. For the president right now, take it from his perspective, what is he trying to gauge?
Yeah, I think what the president is trying to do is use every bit of U.S. leverage to get to a nuclear deal with Iran. Remember, the president said that help was on the way to the protesters. He said that Iran needed new leadership last month. I think those were points of leverage. That, along with the military buildup in the region, is designed to give us the leverage we need to drive Iran to the bargaining table. Remember, Iran is weaker now than they've ever been. They are suffering a serious water shortage. Their economy is in free fall. Israel destroyed their air defenses back in the June war, the 10-day war last year. We've taken the fight to their proxy terrorists. They're weaker now than they've ever been before. The challenge for the United States is that Iran retains short-range missiles, long-range missiles, torpedo boats that they could use in the Strait of Hormuz. So we've got to rely on our intelligence community to plan out how Iran might respond to any one of U.S. attacks, if indeed we need to launch them.
Okay, so we just played a clip from the supreme leader, but the Iranian president, according to a report earlier today, about 7 hours ago, said that he's ordering nuclear negotiations with the United States. Do you believe that? And if so, what form would that take?
Yeah, I think that's front and center for Director Ratcliffe and the intelligence community to advise the president. With Iran, it's always mistrust and verify. And so, yes, Iran may want to enter into negotiations. The question is whether they do that in good faith. Just a few days ago, they signed a strategic cooperation agreement with Russia and China designed to help them together bust our sanctions and build out their defense cooperation. So we have to be worried about any potential negotiations with Iran where Russia and China could be spoilers.
Okay, follow up on that after we hear from Lindsey Graham. He's talking tough. Here we go.
I have every confidence that President Trump will do what he promised to the people. Help is on the way. Keep protesting. If this regime falls, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, they all go. There's no deal to be done here. These people are not trustworthy. President Trump, you said help is on the way. That has to be real. It has to be real soon.
Sounds like a red line, something we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. You mentioned the thousands of Iranian ballistic missiles that could cause havoc all over the Middle East. Our partners in the Arab world have told Iran that they've got nothing to do with this if there's military action that takes place. So you've got a lot of different cross currents. If the president and his administration were to agree to nuclear talks, would that not just be a stall tactic on behalf of Iran as they have done in the past repeatedly?
Yeah, it absolutely could be, and I think there'll be a timetable for Iran to demonstrate that they're negotiating good faith. And if they don't, then we have the capacity, the capability, the will to launch strikes on Iran. Make no mistake, there will be collateral damage in the region. Iran, I think, is facing a lower threshold than ever before because of the risk to regime change that we talked about, to launch counterstrikes against the United States and our allies. Remember, Secretary Rubio testified last week the United States has roughly 30 to 40,000 troops stationed in the region whom Iran might seek to target. So we have to be cognizant of that as well.
Dan, thank you. Great gets your expertise. We'll watch it by the hour as of now. Going forward, Dan Hoffman, thank you, sir, for coming on today.
Let's bring in Fox News senior strategic analyst General Jack Keane. General, there is this prevailing sense that the last couple of times there were uprisings in Iran, even though the scale was smaller than they are now, 2018, 2021, the U.S. really failed to sort of seize the momentum and take advantage of it to U.S. interests. What would you most like to see the administration do now?
Well, I think we have a clear choice, and actually it's an historic choice and a remarkable opportunity before us. On the one hand, if we make a deal with Iran, let's even make the assumption that it's a good deal. Not only no enriched uranium, limits on ballistic missiles, and no support for proxies. That's as good a deal as we could ever hope to have. But what does that really do? That extends the life of the regime indefinitely for many years to come, which would actually result in some kind of sanction relief down the road. And what a betrayal that is to the tens of thousands who gave up their lives to do what? Not to make a nuclear deal, to get rid of this regime. The other choice is we can conduct a military operation that's well planned and will be well executed with the Israelis to finish this regime once and for all. And if that takes place, think of that. They have been in power, Jillian, since 1980. 7 presidents, in addition to President Trump, have had to deal with this diabolical, barbaric regime that has destabilized the Middle East for years and killed over thousands of Americans, not to speak of the people in the region. And we now have an opportunity to end it. That will be a paradigm shift in the Middle East that will see progress for many decades to come. And what an achievement that would be for the Trump administration to be able to finally put this to rest.
You know, that's so interesting, General, this line of reasoning whereby, look, you sit down with these people, you talk to them, to the regime leaders, you give them power, you give them legitimacy, you maybe extend their lifeline. That pretty closely echoes a lot of criticism from the right of the Obama administration back when they were, negotiating the JCPOA. A lot of Republicans were saying, look, just by talking to these guys, you're legitimizing them.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, listen, the history of our presidents with this regime is really something. 7 other presidents, not counting President Trump, have dealt with this regime. 3 of them did not retaliate after they killed scores of Americans. 3 presidents, 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat. All 7 of them during their tenure let the Iranian regime grow and increase in strength and also to destabilize the Middle East. 4 years. Trump came in the first administration, killed the iconic figure Qasem Soleimani. Nobody else had touched him. And he asked the briefer, why haven't we killed him before? Now he's planning to kill more Americans, sir, because everybody feared the consequences of that act. And now he's taken down their nuclear program as well. This is the first president that directly confronted the regime. Now he has the opportunity to finish them. And I think he's going to take that opportunity.
Wow, some provocative points there, some very powerful reasoning. General, thank you so much for taking time with us today, sharing your expertise. We appreciate it.
Yeah, great talking to you, Jillian and John. Thank you.
Welcome back, America. We're here with Douglas Murray. You know, Douglas Murray, it wasn't that long ago when you'd have a generation of Americans, or Brits for that matter, where if you had a regime in the Middle East that tried to assassinate the president or your prime minister, that alone would be the basis for a deadly military response. And yet we have much more than that. We have a regime that keeps announcing it's going to keep trying to make nuclear weapons and ICBMs to reach the United States and Europe and so forth and so on. I'm just going to ask you bluntly, why do we allow this to persist? The West I'm talking about. Europe, in many ways, is even worse than the rest of the world in dealing with Iran and so on. Why do we react this way?
Well, I'd add one more to that, Mark, if I may, which is, I mentioned this in the New York Post this week. Just consider the fact that one of the reasons why so many thousands of American servicemen were killed and wounded by IEDs and other roadside traps in Iraq after 2003 is because the Iranian revolutionary government sent those weapons and sent their militia in order to help bog down American troops and kill American troops as well as other Western allies in Iraq. There was a time not only where we would respond to attempts to assassinate our leaders, but to the successful efforts to kill thousands of our troops. There was a time when we would have responded to that as well. You know, there are a lot of people I've heard in recent weeks since President Trump has rightly been threatening the regime in Iran. There have been a lot of people who say, oh, well, don't you remember 2003 Iraq and so on? And of course we all do. But one of the reasons why Iraq went so bad was precisely because the Ayatollah and the mullahs in Iran sent their death squads into Iraq to attack and kill American troops and to make Iraq another vassal state of the Iranian revolutionary government. They've got away with this and much more for 47 years now. And the question is, as you say, why don't we do something about it? I think it's because the Iranians have got used to the idea that we don't really mean it. I said in the Post this week, just remember back to 2007, a British naval vessel, Royal Naval vessel, was encountered by the Iranians in a contested bit of water, and they kidnapped about 15 British sailors of the Royal Navy, and they held them hostage. And there was this pathetic bargaining by the then British government, and it was so humiliating, and the mullahs came out on top. They're used to doing things like that, and much worse, with zero consequences. And the question to me is, perhaps in Donald Trump, they have finally found a rival, a contestant, you might say, who is willing to actually act when they do things that are so palpably, visibly wicked, as in massacring tens of thousands of peaceful protesters. That's the sort of thing which you would think we might summon up the moral courage to respond to.
I think you're right. I think we're about to, God willing. I certainly hope so. Douglas Murray, I want to thank you so much for your wisdom. It's just terrific to talk to you. God bless you, my friend.
And you, Mark.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.